Hello. Thanks for choosing me over the news. I don't watch the news, it's horrible. Thank you very much for being here. Um, we're going to recap the last chapter, which won't be hard because it's not a great deal happens, and then leap into the next chapter and discuss it maybe, or talk about quarantine, or I don't know. I'm very tired today. I know I say that in every episode of this, but I really am. Um, Thanks to Evelyn today who dropped off my meds, enabling me to live in the community. Very exciting. Oh, and it's Anzac Day tomorrow. Wow. There's just so much going on. Hello! We've got Evelyn and John and Danny and not Fitz. He can't be fucked. He's going to sleep. I'm wearing some earrings Evelyn gave me. I'm very enchanted with them, actually. It is cold right now. I don't know. I think it's just me. I think I'm just feeling colder than usual. I've got my lovely flannel jumper shirt on. A warehouse essential item, part of their 2020 pandemic essential range, which only includes one dress, and it's a maternity dress, and they don't have any skirts. So, well, obviously, enforcing traditional gender roles is not essential, which is great. I approve. Okay. So, yesterday on Wuthering Heights. Sorry, I have had a strep sore. Isabella Linton died, or Isabella Heathcliff as she became after her marriage, and then named her son Linton Heathcliff just to piss everyone off. She died. Edgar Linton went to London, where Isabella had been living, to pick up her son, to be like, "Oh, sorry you're dead, sis. I'm going to take your son home, though. Everything will be fine unless his dad wants him." And then, you know. Meanwhile, Nellie and Kathy too, are at home, and Nellie claims that she didn't want this to happen, but she told Kathy not to go to a certain place on the moors. And she also told her to go out riding alone on her pony and not to be underfoot in the house. And then Nellie acts all shocked because Kathy too goes to that place she's not meant to go during one of her solo rides. She meets Heathcliff, and yeah, she met Heathcliff, didn't she? Josh, awesome. That's what's up. Yeah. So then Kathy too goes to Wuthering Heights, and she meets Hareton Earnshaw, who she's not quite sure what to make of him because she's 13 and he's 18. So they're laughing and chatting and having a great time, and then Nellie comes in, she's all pissed off or pretending to be, and she's like, "Oh, Hareton Earnshaw is your cousin." And Kathy too is like, "No, I don't want him to be my cousin, he looks poor." And she mistakes him for a servant, and he gets all offended, and then she starts crying, and he hands her a puppy to cheer her up, but she just cries even harder. Ridiculous. That is a kind-hearted young man. Exactly. Nellie, yeah, I'm gonna read that out in case people are watching this and not looking at the comments. Nellie can't even say she didn't expect it. She was around the Earnshaw kids who flouted all rules on principle, which they did. Nellie is one of the Earnshaw kids in a way, but in another, much more important way, she isn't. I think that's her problem. So yes, Linton Heathcliff, the son of Isabella Linton and Heathcliff Heathcliff. He comes home. He's 12 years old, 6 months younger than Kathy too, and he's sad and frightened, and he cries sometimes and enjoys having a hug and having someone to sit with him till he falls asleep in this dark, terrifying new place. Also, he gets cold in Yorkshire. So this all means that he is weak, and she doesn't say effeminate. She just says, weak and sickly and not not a real person, really. This is a 12-year-old boy mourning the death of his only parent and then being ripped out of London and everything he knew and taken to live at Thrushcross Grange. So, but they don't have to put up with him for very long because Heathcliff Heathcliff sends Joseph to go and pick him up. Nellie is so mean. And she's like, oh, well, Kathy just wanted to play with him and make him her little darling pet. So, I mean, of course, she wasn't mad at him for being so weak, but I thought he was a little bitch. Imagine crying just because your mother died and you were a little boy. Nellie is unforgiving of human emotion. But yeah, Heathcliff sends Joseph to come pick up Linton. And if you're actually reading this book in the text, people are referred to by their surnames only a lot of the time. And then when a surname becomes a first name, it's all very. So they got Nellie to lie to Linton and to say, "Oh, your dad wants you to live with him. That'll be nice, won't it? Come on, let's go for a little pony ride." And really early in the morning, so Kathy too doesn't wake up and make a scene. And takes him to Heathcliff's to Wuthering Heights, where he doesn't really know anyone or like the food, and everyone makes fun of him. And Heathcliff is like, "What the fuck is this? This looks like a boy, Isabella. I hate him already." And Nellie's like, "Well, bye." So yeah, interesting though when they needed somebody to be like a Judas goat, Nellie stepped up to that plate. Mixing metaphors, but So Nellie kind of sneaks out, and Linton starts yelling, "Don't leave me! I won't stay here." And yeah, Nellie just gets on her horse and fucks off. Sucks to be him. So it's only 8:30, 8 minutes 30 in. Sorry, I'm a bit stuttery today. But I think we'll begin the chapter today. Wuthering Heights, chapter 21. Are we all ready? We should all be ready, I think. Hang on, I think I see Niobe. Niobe, is that you? Nope. Nope, wasn't her. Wuthering Heights, chapter 21. We had sad work with little Kathy that day. She rose in high glee, eager to join her cousin, and such passionate tears and lamentations followed the news of his departure that Edgar himself was obliged to soothe her, by affirming he should come back soon. He added, however, "if I can get him," and there were no hopes of that. This promise poorly pacified her, but time was more potent, and though still at intervals, she inquired of her father when Linton would return. Before she could see him again, his features had waxed so dim in her memory that she did not recognize him. His features were already dim and weak, Nellie. When I chanced to encounter the housekeeper of Wuthering Heights, in paying business visits to Gimmerton, I used to ask her how the young master got on, for he lived almost as secluded as Catherine herself, and was never to be seen. I could gather from her that he continued in weak health, and was a tiresome inmate. She said Mr. Heathcliff seemed to dislike him ever longer and worse, though he took some trouble to conceal it. He had an antipathy to the sound of his voice, and could not do at all with his sitting in the same room with him many minutes together. Oh dear. There seldom passed much talk between them. Linton learnt his lessons and spent his evenings in a small apartment they called the parlour, or else lay in bed all day, for he was constantly getting coughs and colds and aches and pains of some sort. And I never knew such a faint-hearted creature, added the woman, nor one so careful of himself. He will go on if I leave the window open a bit late in the evening. Oh, it's killing, a breath of night air. And he must have a fire in the middle of summer, and Joseph's tobacco pipe is poison. To be fair, tobacco is poison, Linton knew. And he must always have sweets and dainties, and always milk forever, heeding naught how the rest of us are pinched in winter. And there he'll sit, wrapped in his furred cloak in his chair by the fire, with some toast and water or other slop on the hob to sip at. And if Hareton, for pity, comes to amuse him, Hareton is not bad-natured, though he's rough. They're short apart, one swearing and the other crying. I believe the master would relish Earnshaw's thrashing him to a mummy, if he were not his son. And I'm certain he would be fit to turn him out of doors if he knew half the nursing he gives himself. But then he won't go into danger of temptation. He never enters the parlour. And should Linton show those ways in the house where he is, he sends him upstairs directly. Oh, Linton Heathcliff knows what's up. He doesn't want to hang out with his grumpy, sexually frustrated dad. He just wants to sit in his lovely fur cape and then some days not get out of bed at all. What more does anyone want? I divined from this account that utter lack of sympathy had rendered young Heathcliff selfish and disagreeable, if he were not so originally, and my interest in him consequently decayed, though still I was moved with a sense of grief at his lot, and a wish that he had been left with us. Mr. Edgar encouraged me to gain information. He thought a great deal about him, I fancy, and would have run some risk to see him. And he told me once to ask the housekeeper whether he ever came into the village. She said he had only been twice, on horseback, accompanying his father, and both times he pretended to be quite knocked up for 3 or 4 days afterwards. Knocked up doesn't mean pregnant at this point. Just tired, That housekeeper left, if I recollect rightly, 2 years after he came, and another, whom I did not know, was her successor. She lives there still. Oh, so that's Zilla from the beginning. Sorry, I'm having trouble catching my breath. Yeah. Yeah, Linton knows nothing about the human body, but he does know that when he pretends to be sick, he gets pampered over. So he's like, "Oh dear, I think I shall die. I'm pregnant. That's what it must be. And brain fever. And uterine fever. I'm quite knocked up." Time wore on at the Grange in its former pleasant way, till Miss Cathy reached 16. On the anniversary of her birth, we never manifested any signs of rejoicing, because it was also the anniversary of my late mistress's death. Her father invariably spent that day alone in the library, and walked at dusk as far as Gimmerton kirkyard, where he would frequently prolong his stay beyond midnight. Therefore, Catherine was thrown on her own resources for amusement. This 20th of March was a beautiful spring day, and when her father had retired, my young lady came down dressed for going out, and said she asked to have a ramble on the edge of the moor with me. Mr. Linton had given her leave, if we went only a short distance and were back within the hour. "So make haste, Ellen," she cried. "I know where I wish to go, where a colony of moor game are settled. I want to see whether they've made their nests yet, because we don't have prestige television, and we won't for many a year." "That must be a good distance up," I answered. "They don't breed on the edge of the moor." "No, it's not," she said. "I've gone very near with Papa." I put on my bonnet and sallied out, thinking nothing more of the matter. Really? Really? She bounded before me and returned to my side and was off again, like a young greyhound. And at first I found plenty of entertainment in listening to the larks singing far and near, and enjoying the sweet warm sunshine, and watching her, my pet and my delight, with her golden ringlets flying loose behind, and her bright cheek, as soft and pure in its bloom as a wild rose, and her eyes radiant with cloudless pleasure. She was a happy creature and an angel in those days. It's a pity she could not be content. "I'm an angel, and so's my baby." "Well," said I, "where are your moor game, Miss Cathy? We should be at them. The Grange Park fence is a great way off now." "Oh, a little further, Nelly," was her answer continually. "Climb to that hillock, past that bank, and by the time you reach the other side, I shall have raised the birds." There's no way in hell Nelly doesn't know that this is all a scam. But there were so many hillocks and banks to climb and pass that at length I began to be weary, and told her that we must halt and retrace our steps. I shouted to her, as she had outstripped me a long way. She either did not hear or did not regard, for she still sprang on, and I was compelled to follow. Finally she dived into a hollow, and before I came in sight of her again she was 2 miles nearer Wuthering Heights than her own home, and I beheld a couple of persons arrest her, one of whom I felt convinced was Mr. Heathcliff himself. Cathy had been caught in the fact of plundering. I don't know if that's a typo for act, or maybe not. Or at least hunting out the nests of the grouse. The heights were Heathcliff's land, and he was reproving the poacher. "I've neither taken any nor found any," she said, as I toiled to them, expanding her hands in corroboration of the statement. "I didn't mean to take them, but Papa told me there were quantities up here, and I wished to see the eggs." You know, when you would walk for a couple of hours just to see some weird eggs. No, because we have prestige television. Hooray, The Sopranos, hooray. Heathcliff glanced at me with an ill-meaning smile, expressing his acquaintance with the party and, consequently, his malevolence towards it, and demanded who Papa was. Oh, okay, so she can't have met Heathcliff last time. No, she didn't. She didn't meet Heathcliff last time. Right. "Mr. Linton of Thrushcross Grange," she replied. "I thought you did not know me, or you wouldn't have spoken in that way." "You suppose Papa is highly esteemed and respected, then?" he said sarcastically. "And what are you?" "What are you?" inquired Catherine, gazing curiously on the speaker. Oh, sorry, I just got a message alert. It's fine. "That man I've seen before. Is he your son?" She pointed to Hareton, the other individual, who had gained nothing but increased bulk and strength by the addition of 2 years to his age. He seemed as awkward and rough as ever. Hareton is now 20. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't matter. Cathy's 16, Hareton's 20. It used to be that she was 13 and he was 18, but we don't care, it's fine. What's a year between friends? Miss Cathy, I interrupted, it will be 3 hours instead of one that we are out presently. We really must go back. No, that man is not my son, answered Heathcliff, pushing me aside. But I have one, and you have seen him before too. And though your nurse is in a hurry, I think both you and she would be the better for a little rest. Will you just turn this nab of Heath and walk into my house? You'll get home earlier for the ease, and you shall receive a kind welcome. I whispered to Catherine that she mustn't, on any account, accede to the proposal. It was entirely out of the question. Why? She asked aloud. I'm tired of running, and the ground is dewy. I can't sit here. Let us go, Ellen. Besides, he says I have seen his son. He's mistaken, I think, but I guess where he lives, at the farmhouse I visited and coming from Penistone Crags. Don't you? I do. Come, Nelly, hold your tongue. It will be a treat for her to look in on us. Hareton, get forwards with the lass. You shall walk with me, Nelly. Oh no! How could this have happened? How could they have gotten so close to Wuthering Heights? A place where Nelly knows how to go. No, she's not going to any such place, I cried, struggling to release my arm, which he had seized. But she was almost at the doorstones already, scampering round the brow at full speed. Her appointed companion did not pretend to escort her. He shied off by the roadside and vanished. Mr. Heathcliff, it's very wrong, I continued. You know you mean no good. And there she'll see Linton, and all will be told as soon as ever we return, and I shall have the blame. I want her to see Linton, he answered. He's looking better these few days. It's not often he's fit to be seen. And we'll soon persuade her to keep the visit secret. Where is the harm of it? The harm of it is that her father would hate me if he found I suffered her into your home. And I'm convinced you have a bad design in encouraging her to do so, I replied. Heathcliff has a bad design, my goodness. My design is as honest as possible. I'll inform you of its whole scope, he said, that the two cousins may fall in love and get married. I'm acting generously to your master. His young chit has no expectations, and should she second my wishes, she'll be provided for at once as joint successor with Linton. Well, if Linton died, I answered, and his life is quite uncertain, Catherine would be the heir. No, she would not, he said. There is no clause in the will to secure it so. His property would go to me, but to prevent disputes. I desire their union, and am resolved to bring it about. And I'm resolved she shall never approach your house with me again, I returned as we reached the gate where Miss Cathy waited our coming. Oh, how terrible if my new daughter-in-law, who's also kind of my niece and also the daughter of my great lost love, were to die suddenly, and then shortly after her, my sickly son who had inherited everything. They say money can't buy you happiness, but I'm Heathcliff and I'd like to try. That's not in the book, that was just me. Heathcliff bade me be quiet, and preceding us up the path, hastened to open the door. My young lady gave him several looks, as if she could not exactly make up her mind what to think of him. But now he smiled when he met her eyes, and softened his voice in addressing her. And I was foolish enough to imagine the memory of her mother might disarm him from desiring her injury. No, you weren't, Nelly. Linton stood on the hearth. He had been out walking in the fields, for his cap was on, and he was calling to Joseph to bring him dry clothes. He had grown tall of his age, still wanting some months of 16. His features were pretty yet, and his eye and complexion brighter than I remembered them, though with merely temporary lustre borrowed from the salubrious air and genial sun. Now, who is that? Asked Mr. Heathcliff, turning to Cathy. Can you tell? Your son? She said, having doubtfully surveyed first one and then the other. Yes, yes, answered he, but is it the only time you have beheld him? Think. Ah, you have a short memory. Linton, don't you recall your cousin, that you used to tease us so with wishing to see? What, Linton? Cried Cathy, kindling into joyful surprise at the name. Is that little Linton? He's taller than I am. Are you Linton? Little Linton. That's what 15-year-old boys love being called little by their cousin slash girlfriend, whatever she is. The youth stepped forward and acknowledged himself. She kissed him fervently, and they gazed with wonder at the change time had wrought in the appearance of each. And again, this doesn't mean kissing on the mouth, it means a kiss on the cheek, like a greeting. Catherine had reached her full height. Her figure was both plump and slender, elastic as steel, and her whole aspect sparkling with health and spirits. Linton's looks and movements were very languid, and his form extremely slight, but there was a grace in his manner that mitigated these defects, and rendered him not unpleasing. We get it, Nellie, he's not your type. After exchanging numerous marks of fondness with him, his cousin went to Mr. Heathcliff, who lingered by the door, dividing his attention between the objects inside and those that lay without, pretending, that is, to observe the latter, and really noting the former alone. And you are my uncle, then, she cried, reaching up to salute him. And again, in this book, a salute is a greeting, a kiss on the cheek. She's not like sir, because the uncle is like the general of the family. You are my uncle, then. I thought I liked you, though you were cross at first. Why don't you visit at the Grange with Linton? To live all these years such close neighbours and never see us is odd. What have you done so for? I visited it once or twice too often before you were born, he answered. There, damn it! If you have any kisses to spare, give them to Linton. They are thrown away on me. Goes up to a strange man and just starts kissing his cheek a bunch. Naughty Ellen! Exclaimed Catherine, flying to attack me next with her lavish caresses. Wicked Ellen, to try to hinder me from entering. But I'll take this walk every morning in future, may I, uncle? And sometimes bring papa. Won't you be glad to see us? Of course, replied the uncle, with a hardly suppressed grimace, resulting from his deep aversion to both the proposed visitors. But stay, he continued, turning towards the young lady. Now that I think of it, I'd better tell you. Mr. Linton has a prejudice against me. We quarrelled at one time of our lives with unchristian ferocity, and if you mention coming here to him, he'll put a veto on your visits altogether. Therefore you must not mention it, unless you be careless of seeing your cousin hereafter. You may come if you will, but you must not mention it. Why did you quarrel? Asked Catherine, considerably crestfallen. He thought me too poor to wed his sister, answered Heathcliff, and was grieved that I got her. His pride was hurt, and he'll never forgive it. Well, that's wrong, said the young lady. Sometime I'll tell him so. But Linton and I have no share in your quarrel. I'll not come here, then. He shall come to the Grange. It will be too far for me, murmured her cousin. To walk 4 miles would kill me. No, come here, Miss Catherine, now and then. Not every morning, but once or twice a week. The father launched towards his son a glance of bitter contempt. I am afraid, Nelly, I shall lose my labour, he muttered to me. Miss Catherine, as the ninny calls her, will discover his value and send him to the devil. Now, if it had been Hareton, do you know that 20 times a day I covet Hareton with all his degradation? I'd have loved the lad had he been someone else, but I think he's safe from her love. I'll pit him against that paltry creature, unless it bestir itself briskly. We calculate it will scarcely last till it is 18. Oh, confound the vapid thing. He's absorbed in drying his feet and never looks at her. Linton, Yes, father, answered the boy. Have you nothing to show your cousin anywhere about? Not even a rabbit or a weasel's nest? Hmm. Do you want to come upstairs and see my weasel's nest? And my etchings of my weasel's nest? Take her into the garden before you change your shoes, and into the stable to see your horse. Wouldn't you rather sit here? Asked Linton, addressing Kathy in a tone which expressed reluctance to move again. I don't know, she replied, casting a longing look to the door and evidently eager to be active. And there's a picture of Hareton looking weirdly posing and sexy. Hareton, a well-made athletic youth, good-looking in features. Can you can you see that? There he is. Yeah. I'm not sure if he's standing with his foot propped up on something or if he's just like mid-plie. It doesn't matter. He kept his seat and shrunk closer to the fire. Heathcliff rose and went into the kitchen, and from thence to the yard, calling out for Hareton. Hareton responded, and presently the two re-entered. The young man had been washing himself, as was visible by the glow on his cheeks and his wetted hair. Now Hareton's getting sexy. Oh my goodness. Certainly is. I'll take a picture of it. Put it on in the thread. Oh, I'll ask you, uncle, cried Miss Cathy, recollecting the housekeeper's assertion. That is not my cousin, is he? Yes, he replied, your mother's nephew. Don't you like him? Catherine looked queer. I'm sorry, I know language changes, but he's like, what? Do you think your cousin's sexy? And she's like, nope, I look very lesbian today. I don't think either of my male cousins are particularly sexy. I don't. Is he not a handsome lad? He continued. The uncivil little thing stood on tiptoe and whispered a sentence in Heathcliff's ear. He laughed. Hareton darkened. I perceived he was very sensitive to suspected slights, and had obviously a dim notion of his inferiority. I know. Well, it's too bad for Miss Cathy that the only other women in the world are Zillah, the housekeeper at Wuthering Heights, and Nellie. Everyone else is dead. But his master, or guardian, chased the frown by exclaiming, You'll be the favourite among us, Hareton. She says you are a... what was it? Or something very flattering. Here, you go with her round the farm. And behave like a gentleman, mind. Don't use any bad words, and don't stare when the young lady is not looking at you. And be ready to hide your face when she is. And when you speak, say your words slowly, and keep your hands out of your pockets. Be off, and entertain her as nicely as you can. We're just moving swiftly on. He watched the couple walking past the window. Earnshaw had his countenance completely averted from his companion. He seemed studying the familiar landscape with a stranger's and an artist's interest. Catherine took a sly look at him, expressing small admiration. She then turned her attention to seeking out objects of amusement for herself, and tripped merrily on, lilting a tune to supply the lack of conversation. I've tied his tongue, observed Heathcliff. He'll not venture a single syllable all the time. Nellie, you can recollect me at his age. Nay, some years younger. Did I ever look so stupid, so gormless, as Joseph calls it? Worse, I replied, because more sullen with it. Oh, Hareton, by the way, the first girl you've ever seen your own age, she really likes you, so don't say anything dumb to her. And Hareton just takes a vow of silence for 20 years. I've a pleasure in him, he continued, reflecting aloud. He has satisfied my expectations. If he were a born fool, I should not enjoy it half so much. But he's no fool, and I can sympathize with all his feelings, having felt them myself. I know what he suffers now, for instance, exactly. It is merely a beginning of what he shall suffer, though, and he'll never be able to emerge from his bathos of coarseness and ignorance. I've got him faster than his scoundrel of a father secured me, and lower, for he takes a pride in his brutishness. I've taught him to scorn everything extra animal as silly and weak. Don't you think Hindley would be proud of his son, if he could see him? Almost as proud as I am of mine. But there's this difference. One is gold put to the use of paving stones, and the other is tin polished to ape a service of silver. Mine has nothing valuable about it, yet I shall have the merit of making it go as far as such poor stuff can go. His had first-rate qualities, and they are lost, rendered worse than unavailing. I have nothing to regret. He would have more than any but I are aware of. And the best of it is, Hareton is damnably fond of me. You'll own that I've outmatched Hindley there. If the dead villain should rise from his grave to abuse me for his offspring's wrongs, I should have the fun of seeing the said offspring fight him back again, indignant that he should dare to rail at the one friend he has in the world. Heathcliff chuckled a fiendish laugh at the idea. Giving a villain monologue with a laugh. I made no reply, because I saw that he expected none. Meantime, our young companion, who sat too removed from us to hear what was said, began to evince symptoms of uneasiness, probably repenting that he had denied himself the treat of Catherine's society for fear of a little fatigue. His father remarked the restless glances wandering to the window, and the hand irresolutely extended towards his cap. "Get up, you idle boy!" he exclaimed with assumed heartiness. "Away after them! They are just at the corner by the stand of hives." Linton gathered his energies and left the hearth. The lattice was open, and as he stepped out, I heard Cathy inquiring of her unsociable attendant what was that inscription over the door. Hareton stared up and scratched his head like a true clown. That's what it says. That's what it says in the book. It says Hareton stared up and scratched his head like a true clown. That may be the most beautiful sentence in the entire Western canon. It's some damnable writing, he answered. I cannot read it. Can't read it, cried Catherine. I can read it. It's English. But I want to know why it's there. Scratched his head like a true clown. Not even one of the better-known clowns. Linton giggled, the first appearance of mirth he had exhibited. He does not know his letters, he said to his cousin. Could you believe in the existence of such a colossal dunce? Is he all he should be? Asked Miss Cathy, seriously. Or is he simple, not right? I've questioned him twice now, and each time he looks so stupid I think he does not understand me. I hardly understand him, I'm sure. Linton repeated his laugh and glanced at Hareton tauntingly, who certainly did not seem quite clear of comprehension at that moment. There's nothing the matter but laziness, is there, Earnshaw? He said. My cousin fancies you are an idiot. There you experience the consequence of scorning book learning, as you would say. Have you noticed, Catherine, his frightful Yorkshire pronunciation? Why, where the devil is the use of it? Growled Hareton, more ready in answering his daily companion. He was about to enlarge further, but the two youngsters broke into a noisy fit of merriment, my giddy miss being delighted to discover that she might turn his strange talk to a matter of amusement. They're bullying him, just like all those guys bullied Orc Cop in that movie Orc Cop. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was about an orc who was a cop, and he got bullied pretty badly. I think some other stuff happened, probably. Where is the use of the devil in that sentence? Tittered Linton. Papa told you not to say any bad words, and you can't open your mouth without one. Do try to behave like a gentleman. Now do. If thou weren't more a lass than a lad, I'd fell thee this minute, I would. Pitiful lath of a creature, retorted the angry boor, retreating, while his face burnt with mingled rage and mortification, for he was conscious of being insulted, and embarrassed how to resent it. Oh dear. Mr. Heathcliff, having overheard the conversation, as well as I, smiled when he saw him go, but immediately afterwards cast a look of singular aversion on the flippant pair who remained chattering in the doorway. The boy finding animation enough while discussing Hareton's faults and deficiencies, and relating anecdotes of his goings-on, and the girl relishing his pert and spiteful sayings, without considering the ill nature they evinced. They're just gossiping together. Bright, that was the one. Ortcop. I got really sad when Ortcop was bullied. I don't like it. I liked Ortcop. Everyone should have been nice to him. I do not remember the plot at all. I began to dislike, more than to compassionate, Linton, and to excuse his father in some measure for holding him cheap. Maybe it's because you were such a bitch to him when he first came here. I don't know, Nelly. We stayed till afternoon. I could not tear Miss Cathy away sooner, but happily my master had not quitted his apartment and remained ignorant of our prolonged absence. As we walked home, I would fain have enlightened my charge on the characters of the people we had quitted, but she got it into her head that I was prejudiced against them. Aha, she cried. You take papa's side, Ellen. You are partial, I know, or else you wouldn't have cheated me so many years into the notion that Linton lived a long way from here. I'm really extremely angry, only I'm so pleased I can't show it. But you must hold your tongue about my uncle. He's my uncle, remember, and I'll scold papa for quarrelling with him. I just feel like maybe young Cathy should have been told the truth about her life and her mother from the beginning. Or at least the first time she went round to Wuthering Heights. I don't know. I don't want to tell other people how to parent. And so she ran on, till I relinquished the endeavour to convince her of her mistake. She did not mention the visit that night, because she did not see Mr. Linton. Next day it all came out, sadly to my chagrin, and still I was not altogether sorry. I thought the burden of directing and warning would be more efficiently borne by him than me. But he was too timid in giving satisfactory reasons for his wish that she should shun connection with the household at the Heights, and Catherine liked good reasons for every restraint that harnessed her petted will. How alien! Papa, she exclaimed after the morning's salutations. Guess whom I saw yesterday in my walk on the moors. Papa, you started. You've not done right, have you now? When I kept hoping, it was always disappointed about Linton's coming back. She made a faithful account of her excursion and its consequences, and my master, though he cast more than one reproachful look at me, said nothing till she had concluded. Then he drew her near to him and asked if she knew why he had concealed Linton's near neighbourhood from her. Could she think it was to deny her a pleasure that she might harmlessly enjoy? It was because you disliked Mr. Heathcliff, she answered. Then you believe I care more for my own feelings than yours, Cathy, he said. No, it was not because I disliked Mr. Heathcliff, but because Mr. Heathcliff dislikes me, and is a most diabolical man, delighting to wrong and ruin those he hates if they give him the slightest opportunity. I knew that you could not keep up an acquaintance with your cousin without being brought into contact with him, and I knew he would detest you on my account. So for your own good and nothing else, I took precautions that you should not see Linton again. I meant to explain this sometime as you grow older, and I'm very sorry I delayed it. But Mr. Heathcliff was quite cordial, papa, observed Catherine, not at all convinced. And he didn't object to us seeing each other. He said I might come to his house when I pleased, only I must not tell you, because you had quarrelled with him and would not forgive him for marrying Aunt Isabella. And you won't. You are the one to be blamed. He is willing to let us be friends at least, Linton and I, and you are not. Just explain some shit to her. She's 16. She's old enough to know. My master, perceiving that she would not take his word for her uncle-in-law's evil disposition, gave a hasty sketch of his conduct to Isabella. Oh, okay, here it comes. And the manner in which Wuthering Heights became his property. He could not bear to discourse long upon the topic, for though he spoke little of it, he still felt the same horror and detestation of his ancient enemy that had occupied his heart ever since Mrs. Linton's death. She might have been living yet if it had not been for him, was his constant bitter reflection, and in his eyes Heathcliff seemed a murderer. Miss Cathy, conversant with no bad deeds except her own slight acts of disobedience, injustice, and passion, arising from hot temper and thoughtlessness, and repented of on the day they were committed, was amazed at the blackness of spirit that could brood on and cover revenge for years, and deliberately prosecute its plans without a visitation of remorse. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really hard for people to understand it, but once they do, they're like, damn, that's awesome. Does that feel amazing? And I'm like, yeah, it does. Just a little note, little footnote. She appeared so deeply impressed and shocked at this new view of human nature, excluded from all her studies and all her ideas till now, that Mr. Edgar deemed it unnecessary to pursue the subject. He merely added, "You will know hereafter, darling, why I wish you to avoid his house and family. Now return to your old employments and amusements, and think no more about them." Well, that's not going to work, is it? Because Catherine's bored as shit all the time, and right down the road, she has 2 sexy cousins. I mean, in New Zealand, we call that... I don't know, I didn't have a joke. I'm pretty tired. Shannon. Shannon is the town near the town where I grew up, and it was that town, where they actually did shag sheep and such. Oh, sorry. I'm getting back. Bored, horny, and feral. They are my solicitors. Why, our family's been with Mr. Farrell for years. I want to be Mr. Horny, though. Catherine kissed her father and sat down quietly to her lessons for a couple of hours, according to custom. Then she accompanied him into the grounds, and the whole day passed as usual. But in the evening, when she had retired to her room, and I went to help her undress, I found her crying on her knees by the bedside. "Oh, fie, silly child," I exclaimed. "If you had any real griefs, you'd be ashamed to waste a tear on this little contrariety. You've never had one shadow of substantial sorrow, Miss Catherine. Supposing for a minute that the master and I were dead, and you were by yourself in the world, how would you feel then? Compare the present occasion with such an affliction as that, and be thankful for the friends you have, instead of coveting more." "I'm not crying for myself, Ellen," she answered. "It's for him. He expected to see me again tomorrow, and he'll be so disappointed, and he'll wait for me, and I shan't come." "Nonsense," said I. "Do you imagine he has thought as much of you as you have of him? Hasn't he Hareton for a companion? Not 1 in 100 would weep at losing a relation they had just seen twice for 2 afternoons. Linton will conjecture how it is, and trouble himself no further about you." Unlikely, since Cathy's the first girl he's seen in the last 4 years, or however many years have passed, 2 years. "But may I not write a note to tell him why I cannot come?" she asked, rising to her feet. "And just send those books I promised to lend him. His books are not as nice as mine, and he wanted to have them extremely when I told him how interesting they were. May I not, Ellen?" No, indeed, replied I with decision. Then he would write to you, and there'd never be an end of it. No, Miss Catherine, the acquaintance must be dropped entirely. So Papa expects, and I shall see that it is done. But how can one little note, she recommenced, putting on an imploring countenance. Silence, I interrupted. We'll not begin with your little notes. Get into bed. She threw at me a very naughty look, so naughty that I would not kiss her good night at first. I covered her up and shut her door in great displeasure. But, repenting halfway, I returned softly, and lo, there was Miss standing at the table with a bit of blank paper before her and a pencil in her hand, which she guiltily slipped out of sight on my entrance. You'll get nobody to take that, Catherine, I said, if you write it, and at present I shall put out your candle. I set the extinguisher on the flame, receiving as I did so a slap on my hand and a petulant "Cross thing!" I then quitted her again, and she drew the bolt in one of her worst, most peevish humours. The letter was finished and forwarded to its destination by a milk fetcher who came from the village, but that I didn't learn till some time afterwards. Weeks passed on, and Cathy recovered her temper, though she grew wondrous fond of stealing off to corners by herself, and often, if I came near her suddenly while reading, she would start and bend over the book, evidently desirous to hide it, and I detected edges of loose paper sticking out beyond the leaves. She also got a trick of coming down early in the morning and lingering about the kitchen, as if she were expecting the arrival of something. And she had a small drawer in a cabinet in the library, which she would trifle over for hours, and whose key she took special care to remove when she left it. Yeah, she's writing adult fan fiction. I'll get not too much longer to go because my voice isn't really enjoying this. I am, my voice isn't. One day, as she inspected this drawer, I observed that the playthings and trinkets which recently formed its contents were transmuted into bits of folded paper. My curiosity and suspicions were roused. I determined to take a peep at her mysterious treasures. That's funny, it sounds a bit rude. So at night, as soon as she and my master were safe upstairs, I searched, and readily found among my house keys one that would fit the lock. Having opened, I emptied the whole contents into my apron, and took them with me to examine at leisure in my own chamber. Though I could not but suspect, I was still surprised to discover that they were a mass of correspondence, daily almost, it must have been, from Linton Heathcliff, answers to documents forwarded by her. The earlier dated were embarrassed and short. Gradually, however, they expanded into copious love letters, foolish as the age of the writer rendered natural, yet with touches here and there which I thought were borrowed from a more experienced source. Some of them struck me as singularly odd compounds of ardour and flatness, commencing in strong feeling and concluding in the affected, wordy style that a schoolboy might use to a fancied incorporeal sweetheart. Ew. I think Heathcliff is helping his son write love letters to Cathy's daughter. Weird. Oh yeah, this is the first time anything suspicious has happened in this part of the world. Whether they satisfied Cathy, I don't know, but they appeared very worthless trash to me. Where are your love letters, Nellie? After turning over as many as I thought proper, I tied them in a handkerchief and set them aside, relocking the vacant drawer. Steal someone else's love letters. Criticizing their writing style. Following her habit, my young lady descended early and visited the kitchen. I watched her go to the door on the arrival of a certain little boy, and while the dairymaid filled his can, she tucked something into his jacket pocket and plucked something out. I went round by the garden and laid wait for the messenger, who fought valorously to defend his trust, and we spilt the milk between us, but I succeeded in abstracting the epistle, and threatening serious consequences if he did not look sharp home. I remained under the wall and pursued Miss Cathy's affectionate composition. It was more simple and more eloquent than her cousin's, very pretty and very silly. Nellie is so rude. God. I shook my head and went meditating into the house. The day being wet, she could not divert herself with rambling about the park, so at the conclusion of her morning studies she resorted to the solace of the drawer. Her father sat reading at the table, and I, on purpose, had sought a bit of work in some unripped fringes of the window curtain, keeping my eyes steadily fixed on her proceedings. Never did any bird flying back to a plundered nest, which it had left brimful of chirping young ones, express more complete despair in its anguished cries and flutterings than she, by her single "oh!" and the change that transfigured her late happy countenance. See, why would you do this, Nellie? You're the only mother she knows. Mr. Linton looked up. What is the matter, love? Have you hurt yourself? He said. His tone and look assured her he had not been the discoverer of the hoard. No, Papa, she gasped. Ellen, come upstairs. I'm sick. I obeyed her summons and accompanied her out. Oh, Ellen, you have got them, she commenced immediately, dropping on her knees when we were enclosed alone. I'll give them to me, and I'll never, never do so again. Don't tell Papa. You have not told Papa, Ellen? Say you have not. I've been exceedingly naughty, but I won't do it any more. With a grave severity in my manner, I bade her stand up. So, I exclaimed, Miss Catherine, you are tolerably far on, it seems. You may well be ashamed of them. Nellie has no right to be doing this. I want to reach through the book and... Never mind. A fine bundle of trash you study in your leisure hours, to be sure. Why, it's good enough to be printed. But what do you suppose the master will think when I display it before him? I haven't shown it yet, but you needn't imagine I shall keep your ridiculous secrets. For shame. And you must have led the way in writing such absurdities. He would not have thought of beginning, I'm certain. I didn't, sobbed Cathy, fit to break her heart. I didn't once think of loving him till... Loving, cried I, as scornfully as I could utter the word. Loving! Did anybody hear the like? I might just as well talk of loving the miller who comes once a year to buy our corn. Pretty loving, indeed, and both times together you have seen Linton hardly 4 hours in your life. Now here is the babyish trash. I'm going with it to the library, and we shall see what your father says to such loving. Oh, she's so mean! Just because Hindley chose to marry some other lady and then go mental. I mean, come on. She sprang at her precious epistles, but I held them above my head, and then she poured out further frantic entreaties that I would burn them. Do anything rather than show them. And being really fully as much inclined to laugh as scold, for I esteemed it all girlish vanity, I at length relented in a measure, and said, If I consent to burn them, will you promise faithfully neither to send nor receive a letter again, nor a book, for I perceive you have sent him books, nor locks of hair, nor rings, nor playthings? We don't send playthings, cried Catherine, her pride overcoming her shame. Nor anything at all then, my lady, I said. Unless you will, here I go. I promise, Ellen, she cried, catching my dress. I'll put them in the fire, do. But when I proceeded to open a place with the poker, the sacrifice was too painful to be borne. She earnestly supplicated that I would spare her 1 or 2. 1 or 2, Ellen, to keep for Linton's sake. It's such a rich and passionate and bewildering thing. That first love with your cousin. First time you fall in love with your cousin is just unlike any other times you fall in love with your other cousins. And Nellie has no right to ruin it. Ellen is such a bitch. She really is. Then again, this was written when the Queen of England was married to her first cousin, so it's probably fine. I unknotted the handkerchief and commenced dropping them in from an angle, and the flame curled up the chimney. Gosh, she's awful. I will have one, you cruel wretch, she screamed, darting her hand into the fire and drawing forth some half-consumed fragments at the expense of her fingers. Very well, and I will have some to exhibit to Papa, I answered, shaking back the rest into the bundle and turning anew to the door. She emptied her blackened pieces into the flames and motioned me to finish the immolation. It was done. I stirred up the ashes and interred them under a shovelful of coals, and she, mutely and with a sense of intense injury, retired to her private apartment. I descended to tell my master that the young lady's qualm of sickness was almost gone, but I judged it best for her to lie down a while. She wouldn't dine, but she reappeared at tea, pale and red about the eyes, and marvellously subdued in outward aspect. Next morning I answered the letter by a slip of paper inscribed, Master Heathcliff has requested to send no more notes to Miss Linton, as she will not receive them. And thenceforth the little boy came with vacant pockets. What? The little monologue about falling in love with your cousin. First cousin love. Nothing like it. The really great thing about having 30 plus cousins is that I never specify which one I mean, ever, whether I'm telling a joke or saying it like an anecdote. So, yeah, I like people to imagine I just have one cousin who has all of the traits of all the others. It is so sad that Kathy was just grabbing little fragments of her letters, and Nellie made her put them on the fire herself to burn them all up. Not cool, Nellie. Not cool. Yeah. Someone we knew married their cousin. No, it was someone my friend knew in Italy married their cousin or something. And so we made up the word "cusband." That's just something that happened in 7th form. It's not that interesting. But yes, Nellie, having found out that Heathcliff has a plan as well to get everything he wants in this life, is like, no, fucker. I'm not moving to Wuthering Heights with Kathy too. She's important. I'm going to marry her to somebody, someone good, so I can live in a nice house. Oh no, I think can't think of a better way to encourage a teenager to love their cousin. Exactly. If you say you can't do it, teens are just going to want to do it even more. No, I think that at this point, Lockwood is just like, well, Nellie is the sensible one. Of course she didn't want her poor Miss Kathy to end up in Heathcliff's hands, and I'm sure there wasn't any nicer way of doing that. She's got him now. Whatever she does probably is nice. Sorry, I've just got one alert. It's been bugging me this whole time. Okay, good. So yeah, the theory that Nellie is the villain, absolutely confirmed. The theory that Lockwood is an imbecile, also confirmed. The theory that can't remember. Confirmed. I need to make some dinner, I think. I'm tired. But yeah, thank you for joining me today. It has been a little bit tricky. I'm getting a little bit worried coming up to treatment, getting a dose of oral ketamine for the first time. Haven't tried that stuff. Don't know if it works. It will work. It works on it has worked on everybody I know who's gone from IM injections to the oral solution. And it will work for me. I'm still freaked out about it. just in case it doesn't work or something goes wrong. So, I'm probably not gonna be a lot of good company over the weekend, but yeah, no Wuthering Heights tomorrow because tomorrow's D&D day. Maybe Sunday. Oh, tomorrow's also Anzac Day. Never forget to always remember the Anzacs, and it's the one day a year when an Australian and a New Zealander can hug in public. Except they can't this year because of coronavirus. Oh no, that's really bad. Oh. Why are my lips so pale? Am I getting enough iron? Am I dying? Am I dying of Kathy's disease? Yes, I respect all troops. The unborn are also troops, all of them. Every unborn fetus is a troop. I don't think we're doing any serious literary analysis at the moment, so I will say ka kite and keep safe, wash your hands. I'm a doctor. Bye.